Rachel and her colleagues here have been giving coffee and snacks to federal employees who are furloughed. Yesterday they took a whole bunch of donuts and coffee to our TSA agents who are valiantly working without pay and protecting us. And after September 11th, I think we all understand we may have forgotten in time and become desensitized, but the risk of air travel is still incredibly challenging. And the pressures of those jobs and to be thinking about not being paid while you're trying to do the job right is incredibly tough. So we want to thank you and many other businesses in New Jersey who are giving meals to federal employees, to financial institutions, and as a member of the Senate Banking Committee, I want to applaud those financial institutions that are forbearing during this period of time for federal employees on their mortgages, on their loans, on not having bad credit referrals. And I am going to be sending something out, hopefully with a bunch of my colleagues, to a large universe of financial institutions that our federal employees should not be hurt during this period of time. They should not find themselves in the midst of a foreclosure that they cannot control. They should not find themselves with penalties because of payments that are late. And they certainly shouldn't get bad credit ratings as a result of what the federal government is in the midst of. So I want to appreciate those financial institutions that have already done this on their own initiative, but there's a lot more that can be done, and we're calling upon them to do it as well. None of our federal workers asked for this, but they are in the midst of it. And the reality is these are exceptional people who do critical work for our state and our nation. And to be very honest with you, many of them are very talented, and if they chose to do something else, could make a lot more money. They do this in part because of their passion. They do it in part because of their commitment to service, like our Coast Guard men and women who are protecting us. And as a state that is a coastal state, we understand the importance very vividly of the Coast Guard for national security, with the megaport of the East Coast, the Port of Elizabeth and Newark, with recreational fishing, commercial fishing, with the risk of lives. We understand what the Coast Guard is all about. And to have the Coast Guard, which I consider a branch of our national defense, not to be paid is pretty outrageous, which is why I've sponsored legislation with my colleagues to make sure that in a shutdown, and I hope we never have one again, that Coast Guard men and women get paid during a shutdown, because they're as part of the national defense as any other part of our armed services who are getting paid. So it's incredibly important. Now, this shutdown did not have to happen. Back in December, I voted with all of my colleagues in the United States Senate to fund all of the remaining 9 or so departments of the federal government that are presently unfunded. It was a unanimous vote, a unanimous vote. And for those of you who may follow politics, you know that these days unanimous votes don't take place all of the time. It was a unanimous vote. It was largely based upon the President's budget requests to the Congress of the United States. And yet, after that was done, because of some right-wing commentators, the President ultimately backed off of his commitment, a commitment that Vice President Pence made very clear to us in Congress, that if we voted for this budget that included between $1.3 and $1.6 billion for border security, that the President would sign it. Only after these commentators made the comments that they did the President renege on it and insist on what is an ever-changing figure as it relates to his desired wall. So this could have ended in December, should have ended in December, when we unanimously passed this. It can end now, because once again the House of Representatives has passed all of the bills necessary to keep the government open. These are the same exact figures that was unanimously approved by the Senate. And what's stopping us is that Senator McConnell, the Republican leader, just will not post these bills. And I believe, as I said on the Senate floor, I think yesterday, that if he posts the bills, you will see a strong bipartisan vote that would send a very clear message to the president that he might very well be in override territory should he decide to veto it. So we have an opportunity to get this government open, and we should, both for the American people and for the nearly, I thought it was 5,000, but I did the math yesterday, and it's closer to nearly 8,000 New Jersey federal workers who are affected by this shutdown. So there's no reason for the government to be closed. It should open, and it should open immediately. There are the votes to do so. And the last point I'd like to make, why must you keep, even if there is a dispute over what border security looks like, and there is a legitimate different point of view as to what border security looks like, why must you keep all the other departments of the federal government that have nothing to do with border security closed and held hostage to this one question? So at a minimum, fund everything else. And then if you want to continue to dispute the question on border security, that remains in the Department of Homeland Security. And even there, I would argue you extend it for a period of time while you're negotiating. Doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense for national security. Doesn't make any sense for our economy. Certainly doesn't make any sense for the 800,000 federal workers and several million federal contract employees who are also affected as a result of the shutdown.